Table mic, one, two, three. Table mic, one, two, three. Standing mic, one, two, three. Standing mic. Standing mic, one, two, three. Standing mic, increased volume test. One, two, three. Increased volume. Mic one, one, two, three. Mic one, mic one. Mic two, one, two, three. Mic two. Three, one, two, three. Mic three. Mic four, one, two, three. Mic four. Mic five, one, two, three. Mic five. Mic six, one, two, three. Mic six. Mic seven, one, two, three. Mic seven. Mic eight, two, three. Mic eight. Mic nine, one, two, three. Mic nine.
Testing one, two, three. Test, test. Testing one, two, three.
Forum. We're just waiting. Rowan's not going to be here, and I think Maria may log in a little bit, but if not, get ready to go. So I'll call the July 13th, 2026 Planning Commission meeting to order. First agenda item is approval of the agenda.
You just showed up.
Oh, and Maria is here. Maria, will you do me a favor and just identify yourself?
Hi, I'm Maria Arsenlis, on the Planning Commission.
Thank you. And it's approval of the agenda. If anybody has any changes or edits they'd like to make, let me know. Otherwise, I'd ask for unanimous consent to approve the agenda. Hearing none, the agenda is approved. Next is consideration of the June 22nd, 2026 minutes. Take a minute to read those over. Let me know if you have any changes or edits. If not, I'd ask for unanimous consent to approve the minutes. Hearing none, the minutes are approved. Next is general business. This is comments from the public about anything that's not on the agenda. There's nobody in attendance in person, but we have some folks online. If anyone online would like to speak to anything. Seamus.
Yeah, hi all. I just wanted to chime in and say that it was heartening to see the article in the Bridge discussing, the work and discussions of the previous meetings. That article got posted in the Montpelier Facebook group, and though there were like a diversity of opinions there were, I would say, the majority of the commenters kind of generally supportive of the idea of the work that the commission is doing to, make some of these changes to our zoning and our maps to support more housing in Montpelier. So just wanted to chime in with that, positive piece of news, both seeing the work featured, but also the response to it from some of our neighbors in the community. So I was heartened to see that.
Great, thanks to hear. Is there anybody else online that would like to comment on anything? Seeing nobody raising their hands, next is comments from the commission. I have a couple of things. First, a couple of weeks ago, the city appointed me to be the primary delegate to the Central Vermont Regional Planning Commission. Mike is the alternate. So I'll be going to my first meeting tomorrow for the CVRPC. I will start giving regular updates to this group as those meetings progress. Is there anything that anybody in this group wants me to sort of carry water for at the Regional Planning Commission? Let me know. But obviously these things will develop as we go forward. The other thing I just wanted to say is I ran into John Copans from the Foundation for Resilient Vermont the other day on the street. We were having a chat. He also mentioned the Bridge article. And we were just chatting about that. And we started having sort of a broader conversation about ways that we might interface with his organization. Obviously, it's a little different because it's not a city, it's not a city entity, it's a nonprofit group. But they are working on some river corridor studies and whatnot. As you remember, he gave a presentation to us a few months ago about securing a grant for flood resiliency. I'm still trying to figure out ways what the most appropriate way to really plug in with that organization and have them plug in with us. I'm open to suggestions, but so far we have just sort of exchanged some our contact information, and we're trying to figure out ways to sort of kind of keep each other abreast of what we're doing. I think given the work that they're doing, especially with the river corridor work that sort of is running in parallel with our front to back zoning regulation changes, there might be some opportunity to have have that group help inform what we're doing here. So again, we're still trying to figure out the contours of how that might work. We don't have anything settled, but two things. One, if anybody has any suggestions about how we might, again, sort of liaison with them, it'd be a little bit different than what we're doing with the other sort of subcommittees, the town. Let me know. And then two, if you have any ideas that you think we might, if there's issues that you think that group might help inform us with our work, let me know and we can figure out how to work things out. So that's just to say that John was excited about the prospect of having closer communication with the planning commission, and I agree with that. So I'm not quite sure where it leads, but let's try. That's all I have. Anybody have anything? Comments, updates?
My updates are an agenda item, so I'll say them.
Perfect. Anybody else? Nope. Okay. Next is the presentation from Camille. Is it? How do you pronounce the last name? I'm sorry.
It's a Wimpy, sorry.
Wimpy. All right. Thank
Like
you.
Diver Wimpy Kid.
Okay. Camille Wimpy on route zoning concept. Thank you very much for coming this afternoon. Looking forward to hearing what you have to present.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah.
I'm with Tim Love also from UTL to present today.
Hi there. Yeah, and I guess I'll do a quick kickoff for this. So I had a happenstance run in with Miro Weinberger from former mayor of Burlington. He's with Let's Build Homes. And I ran into him in the parking lot, and he was talking about trying to find opportunities where some of the work that they're doing can get implemented into towns. And one of the things they're working on is this root zoning concept. And so I said, we're doing a zoning update. It may be an opportunity to at least educate you on what root zoning is. You may hear more about it as their program picks up steam. And so we wanted to just, it may be an opportunity where we can replace not necessarily all of our zoning or all of our design review, but it may be something that we can plug in certain places, and it may be that type of opportunity. But we first wanted to have them come in, and Utils is the consultant working with them on the actual product and project. So they're here. I don't know. I'll keep an eye out to see if Jack or Miro show up, but we'll at least get a presentation and see what it is, and then take comments from you and see how much more we want to have conversations about this opportunity going forward. So Tim and Camille, I'll turn it over to you. And
Great. And if I could have permission to share my screen.
you should be able to. I don't think I've shut it down.
Okay, I'm sending a request now. Let me try again. Oh, here we go. Let me know when you can see the screen.
All right, we can see it.
Great. I mean, there's a bigger backstory here, but the goal of what we're working on is to create a model form-based code, and I'll explain what that means in a minute, that's relatively easy to use, that because of the transects in the code, almost any municipality in the state could use, because the transects range from smaller scale development to larger scale development. And I'll explain what I mean by all of that. And what the Let's Build Homes group and Miro have in mind is that there might be some carrot or a stick process in the future where if municipalities adopt the root zoning, let's say within some percentage of the tier 1 area that's already being contemplated, they might have access to some funding and or might be exempt from some of Act 250. Now you'd have to ask Miro and Jack the details of the larger package, but we're just here to explain our draft model code and see what you think, if that makes sense. And so I think a little bit of a background is we are consultants. We're doing a lot of rezoning work in Massachusetts. And a lot of what we're recommending is based on work that we've done over, let's say, the last 5 or so years. And so as a primer, there's really 3 primary frameworks that are typically used for zoning to set the scale and density of buildings. One is a floor area ratio based zoning system, which sets density at some simple multiplier times the lot size. I think many of you are familiar with this. The challenge with it is that with the other dimensional standards that are typically used, setbacks, maximum heights, the built form that you get can be a little bit unpredictable because an FAR can be masked and shaped in a couple of different ways. Also, where the real estate market is very active, especially in Boston and the surrounding communities, floor area ratio based zoning typically privileges small units because the development envelope is fixed, the total gross square area. And so most developers think that then if they do small units, they get more units in a project. And that tends to result in a higher rate of return. In suburban locations, dwelling units per acre is typically the framework that's used. And towns prefer this because the number of dwelling units per acre means it's relatively easy to calculate infrastructure impacts, sanitary and water. And it's also a way to get a handle on households relative to doing planning around schools and the population of schools. In communities where the real estate market is hot, like the western and northern suburbs of Boston, dwelling unit per acre generally privileges large units because if you can do 2 units per acre, the rate of return on your investment is going to be higher if you build 2 McMansions versus starter homes, and so that tends to be the market impact of those. And then the third framework that some of you might be familiar with is form-based zoning. There is a template for form-based zoning that has been adopted generally nationally with graphics that look like this that tend to set development based on different building typologies and then a set of dimensional standards for each building typology. And so in different districts, different families of buildings can be used. And what you're seeing here is the zoning that we helped the city of Somerville, Massachusetts with, and a building type called a multiplex, which is really based on 6-unit buildings that are really 2 triple deckers that are brought together. And so all of the rules for the multiplex are laid out with a graphic of that building type shown. And then in some districts in the city, multiplexes are one of usually a couple of building types that are allowed. The challenge with form-based zoning is that for many municipalities, the number of rules is overwhelming for a staff, especially for a staff that doesn't have architecture training, because it's a very architect-y kind of framework. And so even the city of Somerville is rethinking some of its zoning now to make it a little bit simpler for those reasons that it's been a little bit difficult to review and enforce. And in fact, Camille and I are working on that rezoning of the rezoning project. And so what we're recommending for root zoning is something that we're calling form-based light, which is a much simpler form-based zoning that's based on really just 2 principles, which is a maximum building footprint And if you think about like the little plastic houses of Monopoly, that has an important impact on the size of a building that can be built, and then the building height, which is primarily expressed in number of stories, but also can be expressed in feet. And in most jurisdictions, a maximum height expressed in feet is also desired politically too. And then for some of the lower transects, a roof form requirement, which tends to be a pitched roof. And so um, in essence, those three ingredients constitute the zoning. And this is the framework instead of dwelling units per acre or FAR or a more complicated four-base code. And so that's just a graphic of the footprint in gray, the number of stories, and where roof form is impacted. That third floor in this case has to be under a pitched roof with certain numbers of qualifications. So what does the roof pitch look like? This is the roof pitch that we're proposing for the draft of the root zoning, which is a roof pitch that can't be any steeper than 14 by 12, which is 49 degrees. And that provides ample headroom to get almost a full floor under the roof. And then coupled with that are relatively liberal dormer requirements, either shed dormers or gable dormers, to make that roof occupiable. And then some requirements about how high the pitch can be. Often, by the way, builders or developers will make that top of the roof flat and not bring the pitch all the way to the top. And then because the maximum footprint is fixed, you're allowed, like Mr. Potato Head, to attach things to the building volume that exceed the footprint. And that includes bay windows, in some communities, balconies, awnings, and even porches. And that in a way is an incentive for developers to add those things because they're a way to exceed the footprint, and it's a way to encourage the market to maybe articulate new buildings more than they would otherwise. So those are all of the kind of add-ons that we typically include as part of the form-based light recipe. And then what we tend to focus on is where parking can go. Not in front of buildings, but at the side or preferably in the rear. And our zoning even has prescriptions about how to screen the parking if it comes close. So those are the basic principles of form-based light, which is footprint, height, and then the add-ons and where parking goes. We know that through, we are also the consultants, by the way, for the 802 Homes project. My partner, Matthew Littell, is leading that, but Camille's also involved with that. And as a result of that work, we're very familiar with the small multifamily vernacular in Vermont. And these are just some examples that were collected, dimensioned, and reviewed carefully for the 802 Homes project that are also informing the root zoning. And so these are this is the transect we've come up with. From transect 1, which is the smallest, a maximum footprint at 1,400 square feet and a maximum height of 2.5 stories. The half story, by the way, is a story under the pitch roof. And if you think about that, that's probably going to be a 2 or 3 unit building. If you think about a footprint of 1,400 square feet, maybe an apartment of 1,300 square feet, multiplying that by 3 as maybe the maximum number of dwelling units you could get in that footprint. The next transect up is 2,800 square feet, again at 2.5 stories. So that might be as large as a 6-unit building, maybe. Transect 3 is 4,000 square feet at 3.5 stories. And that works out well with the maximum single stair building you can have in Vermont, which is a 4-story building. There's an example of that in Fairleigh that we're showing. And then transects 4 and 5 are more typical corridor accessed, either condominiums or apartments. Transect 4 is on the smaller size, and transect 5 is, what the market prefers to build, I would say, in a place like Burlington. So those are the tiers of transects that we've drafted into the route zoning. And so what we've done to date is partnered with a couple of communities, and we've taken the draft zoning for a test drive. And Camille is going to show you some test fits we've done of these different transects in different communities and what they look like, the scale of development you get, to show you how we think it's working. And that's involved, by the way, conversations with the planning directors in these communities. So with that, I'll turn it over to Camille. Any questions so far? It might be easier to see what we're up to when Camille goes through the test fits, maybe.
You go to the next slide. Great. So this is looking at transect 2, which was that second smallest transect that we just showed. So this is a site with an existing building. That's the one that's kind of colored gray in the middle of the darker green parcel area. So that existing building has 3 units in it. And then you can see that kind of 4-unit building is the maximum transect 2 size. So on a parcel of this size, obviously you could fit like multiple buildings. So part of the root zones concept that we're working on has provisions basically for additional buildings. So if you have one building at like transect 2, then additional buildings have to be at the next transect down. So at transect 1. In this case. So that's why those 2 additional new buildings are smaller. So there's the larger building with 4 units and then 2 smaller 2-unit buildings plus the existing building. So you can kind of see how these standards are leading to an outcome that feels appropriately scaled for Main Street in this community.
Yeah, and I think an important principle here is allowing multiple structures per lot, so that large lots aren't penalized versus small lots. And the way conventional zoning handles that is that you can just build, the heights set, but you can just build bigger and bigger buildings. But we think for Vermont, a better solution is to have multiple buildings that might get to the same answer, but because the footprint is set as a maximum, the footprints that you get when they're aggregated both fits in and even picks up on the existing scale of structures that are already built nearby.
Mm-hmm. And in this case, like theoretically, you could fit more units obviously towards the rear of the site, but there is like a significant slope. I'm not sure if you can see like the contour lines on the screen, but that's why that part of the site is not built out. So there's not like a specific limit to the number of units on the lot. So you could, if this was a flat site, continue adding additional buildings to this site. And this is obviously in a bit of a different context where more density is appropriate and on a much larger lot. But we also take into account things like the river corridors, and then obviously parking in this case is kind of a huge factor, especially in communities in Vermont. We understand that people drive, so we have to make sure we account for that. So this is showing a possible build out under Transect 4, which was that second largest one. So those 2 kind of larger buildings, this lot's over 2 acres. So in that case, we're permitting like multiple structures of the largest scale. So that's why there's kind of 2 of these largest buildings, and then 3 smaller 12-unit single stair buildings. And then all the parking is accounted for. And we're also showing a little bit of retail, and that's kind of what the orange in the 3D view is denoting, just along this kind of Main Street in this case.
Yeah, and I think just in terms of our methodology doing these, we draft the code thinking about enough choices for the scale of the built form that a community can pick how many steps of the ladder they want to include in the code in total, and then where those are deployed. And then when we do the test fits, we play the role of the architect for the most rapacious and developer to try to stress test the code to see if to make sure there aren't any loopholes and that the urban form that results is an urban form that makes sense. We also are proposing in the draft code that any lot less than 2 acres can be as of right, but any lot 2 acres or more would require site plan review and approval as part of the process. Because once you get to 2 acres and more, there are decisions to make about where the curb cut should be, maybe sensitivities if you can have 2 of the larger format buildings and 3 of the smaller ones fit. There might be just some site plan discussions about where those are organized on the site to maybe make a better contextual relationship and things like that. So that's in our draft zoning, that 2 acres is kind of the threshold of as of right. Anything else, Camille, on this?
I think the other thing to maybe mention is you can see kind of how the setbacks are working on these larger buildings, the setbacks at the top story versus the like pitched roof requirements on the smaller buildings. And then we also have a requirement that the facade needs to be kind of like broken down every 100 feet. So that's what these little kind of niches are, just that the scale of the buildings feels less kind of imposing on the street and more I don't know, appropriate for downtowns with smaller buildings in general.
So so I think the setting up the kit of parts of the code is the easy part. I think the difficulty for communities is both the process and the decisions about where to map the different transects. And so I thought it would be useful to show you how we did that in Newton, Massachusetts, where we developed a similar code. So Newton, Massachusetts is a city. It's a relatively near suburb of Boston, and because of its urban development, it has 12 different village centers that are all in a way like mini downtowns. Some of them have are denser, some are less dense, but they all developed because of commuter train and streetcar lines in the 19th and early 20th century. And in that case, we developed 3 tiers, the densest at 4.5 stories and a 15,000 square foot floor plate, which we called Village Center 3. And then stepping down, excuse me, 3.5 stories at 10,000 square foot footprint. And in an early version, 2.5 stories and a 4,000 square foot footprint, which is the same parameters more or less as a Transect 3 for our draft root zoning. And the way that we ended up mapping the districts in Newton is that it was nothing more complicated than using a kind of design eye to make the decision. So this is one of the village centers in Newton. It's called Newtonville. These are larger single family homes. And then you see near the village center, there's a single story commercial retail. There's some older, taller buildings, a church, and new development that's been built. This used to be the rail corridor, but it's now also the Massachusetts Turnpike with the rail corridor along the side. And there's a commuter rail stop there. This was the existing zoning, and this was our first pass at where to map those 3 tiers, based simply on making a decision about where those building sizes and heights would make the most sense in the future. And you'll see in the center of the square is VC3, which is the densest, a kind of transition to VC2, and then at the edges where it meets single family housing, VC1. I'm pointing this out because we were able to use those 3 tiers in all of the village centers. This is now a map of the entire city of Newton, except for pieces that drop off the top and bottom. And you'll see that in some of the larger village centers, we use more VC3 because they're more established. And others, there's less. And in some, we don't use any of the VC3 at all. We only use VC2 and 1. And so, and in some areas, we just used one of the tiers. And so, in a way, this is a stand-in for the conceptual plan for Vermont, that each community that adopts it can choose which of the range of transects make the most sense based on existing conditions, discussions about the kinds of density that are required in the future. So I think that that's our presentation, just to give you an overview of what we're up to. So I can return to the draft transects, and then maybe we can take some questions.
I have a question. So in the example, that first example, I think showing Transect 2 with the 4 units and then showing the kind of 2 units as infill, there was kind of an explanation that, well, I guess I was hearing that there was kind of an assumption that developers might prefer to just develop new units rather than kind of building on. Was I hearing that correctly? I mean, I'm hearing that this is like for Vermont specifically, which is great. And I'm just kind of curious if developers prefer to infill and build new housing with brand new developments rather than just expanding existing footprints of buildings that are already there.
I think it's a great question. I think in some cases, what this format would allow would be the construction of a second new structure on a larger lot. Like one of the examples that Camille showed, if I go there, where this is a single structure on a very large lot. And so following the rules for Transect 2 and being mindful of the steep topography at the back, this is a likely solution that somebody might do. This could even be true on a smaller lot if there was room with the setbacks to build another structure. It is true with our zoning work that we have come up with a kind of parallel rule where you can keep the existing structure and add on to it. And the rule that we used in Newton, as long as the footprint isn't any bigger than half the footprint of the existing structure, and the addition isn't any closer to the front face of the building than 20 feet away, so that these additions don't take over and assume the existing structure, especially if it's an attractive one like the old Victorian houses in Newton, Massachusetts. But I think our thought is that in many cases, if the lots are large enough, it might just yield a second structure.
Okay, thank you.
Did I miss anything with my answer, Camille?
I don't think so.
Excellent question, though.
Looks like got a question from Sandy Fitzhume online.
Yep. Hi. Can you hear me okay?
Yes,
Can you hear me? Okay.
we can.
I actually have 2 questions that are related. So say you have a transect that the community's decided could be a maximum of 4 stories, and the developer wants to do dense settlement of smaller buildings, 1 to 2 stories. Is that okay to kind of step down and actually dense, very dense, or is that going to be prohibited?
Yeah, I think in general the spirit is yes. You could use any transect lower than the maximum transect that's allowed. It might be true. There might be some expectations though about achieving the density with like a cottage court or a multi-building development. But I think in principle, yes, you could use a lower transect.
Okay, and so in general, there's not maximum densities, right?
Well, the maximum densities are set
It's
by the
more
maximum.
focused on form.
That's right. The maximum is set by the building footprint. And then you can have multiple buildings on the site, but there's a requirement about how close together those can be.
And then the related question is one reason why I was concerned about based zoning, it was first discussed in Montpelier, I don't know, 5 years ago, is that we have very little protection for historic buildings. And you started to talk about, but what do you usually see in place in communities? Because I would say the two most obvious probabilities are actual destruction of the building so that a larger building could be built in its place, or kind of up and over so that the original building's integrity is lost.
I think it's a good question. I think there are actual historic districts, but I think a concern for the non-protected historic fabric is a real one, and so that might mean that the lower transect might be chosen for those locations. And then for larger lots, there might be a separate structure built, but the historic structure would be maintained. I think the other thing that might be worth considering then is a form-based light rule about how big and where additions can go to allow those, pre-World War II homes to remain, but maybe include additional units too. And that was the logic with the Newton, Massachusetts example with the 50 foot of the existing footprint, 20 feet back from the face rule was a way to meet the, that came up through the process. How do we preserve these big old houses? And the preservation folks were happy with that solution. Does that answer your question?
I guess so. Anybody else have any questions for now?
Alan Goldman does have his hand up.
Oh, I'm sorry. Alan, I didn't see your hand there raised.
Oh, that's okay. Good evening. And I want to thank you for a lovely presentation. That was so cool. And I grew up in Woburn Square. So that was amazing to see that. And so to see all the villages again after leaving Woburn and moving to Vermont in my late teens was fantastic. And so you could see how walkable a lot of it was. I grew up on Ferncroft Road, where I could walk to Woburn or I could walk to four corners, as they used to say, to the A&P. So I just wanted to thank you for the form-based zoning presentation. I absolutely loved it. And it was just so cool to see exactly where I grew up until I moved to Vermont. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right.
Okay, I think that's it for questions for now. Not quite sure if there's. What's next?
Wait, and sorry, is Burlington currently using this approach, or this is something that they're considering?
Excuse me?
Is the city of Burlington using this form-based zoning approach, or is there something that they're considering?
We were the city of Burlington's consultant for the rezoning of the R districts, and we used a version of this for that rezoning, probably, I think it was approved maybe 2 years ago. It was when Megan Tuttle was the planning director. And but they're unlikely to use this now because they've got a downtown form-based code now, and they've got an R district form-based code now. So this is coming out of this work, but probably wouldn't have an effect in Burlington itself.
Okay.
there any other,
We've only been testing it with a couple of communities. It hasn't been adopted anywhere yet. I think it's the short answer.
Well, it's exciting to be on the cutting edge.
I'm curious if you have a target community in a place like Vermont. You know, we fall into a category of being 8,000 full-time residents in Montpelier. Burlington is quite a bit larger, and as we all know, there's a lot of tiny towns. Some don't have zoning at all, but even smaller towns, smaller locations that do have zoning. Do you intend on? Do you hope that this is spread throughout all the communities that currently have zoning, or again, is there a target?
Well, I think I think any community who is interested in promoting small multifamily housing could adapt the code. I mean, it might be a community that only uses Transect 1 and 2 and might only use Transect 2 in very limited areas, but I think it still has a value because the form-based components of it mean that the development that results will fit in, and therefore the community might be more likely to have for lots, you know, under 2 acres, as of right zoning regulations, which might incentivize development. And so there's the trade-off is we're going to be a little bit clear about the form we're going to get, and the trade-off is that the path to permitting is going to be a little bit less arduous.
Cool, thank you. Alan, do you have something more?
Yes, thank you. I was going to ask if the planning commission has ever been up to South Hero to look at their most recent development where they've done something very similar. I was also going to ask the consultants if they have seen that experience where they've tried to create housing and buildings. They broke it into multiple structures, and I think they did a lovely job. I just didn't know if anybody else had seen that experience.
Have not.
We haven't seen that particular project, no. Have we? Have you seen it, Camille?
I'm not familiar, no. I'm looking around South Hero now, so maybe I'll find it.
Please take a look. They worked in a firehouse, several small stores, a restaurant.
Oh yeah, I think I found it. Very
and
cute.
It sort of reminded me very much of what you folks are teaching right now. So I thought maybe you were involved.
We are, you know, because we're involved with the 802 Homes project too. We've been very careful to make sure that those prototypes are compliant with the transects that we're proposing here. So
I think what I had envisioned a little bit for this concept was I knew we were going to begin to have conversations about, we're already talking about what we kind of want as our zoning districts and densities. And as we started moving in back down into maybe the design review, we talked about shrinking that down to maybe the historic design review is just the historic design review, or maybe it's just Main Street in the what we call our designated downtown. But we had questions of what did we want to do for the rest of the town. And we had thrown around some ideas. And this, I think, gives us some options. I don't necessarily think for our downtown, because I think we do need to protect. We have the largest historic district in the downtown. We could overlay a Transect 4 into our downtown. I don't know if we would gain that much. I mean, it's really just setting the bulk and massing and parking, which we kind of already have set. But really, I was thinking more outside of that as we start working our way out to College Street and Bailey and start looking outside of the downtown core. Maybe some of these transects could replace our design review, or at least be something we could consider. We could continue to do our design review out there. We could come up with a slightly modified version of our design review out there. Because I know we were trying to replace some of our major site plan standards, because our major site plan requires architectural standards and our zoning right now has architectural standards. So we kind of have this cobbled together piece, and it's like, all right, maybe we can get rid of the design review standards and maybe we can get rid of the architectural standards and replace it with something similar to this. And the idea being that would give a lot of flexibility to the developers in order to look at opportunities. And, there are building lots that are available or that could be made available in certain neighborhoods, especially as you get out to the Res 9 areas, when you've got your town hills and your Berlin streets, and there are places out there or off of those roads where you've got places where you could put in new development. And this would create an opportunity where we could maybe have permitted uses that could fit these things. So I just wanted to make sure we had this conversation so you were aware. There are other communities and statewide that are talking about other opportunities. The city of Montpelier did have an entire set of zoning codes created back well before me. It was a smart code, and that was the name of it. I'd have to go and dig up out of the boxes a copy of it. It never got passed. Boy, I want to say maybe 2000, but maybe it's almost 20 years ago now, 2006, 2008, maybe in that time frame. That
I I don't think a zoning code that sets footprint and maximum stories and maybe roof pitch for the first 2 or 3 transects is necessarily in conflict with design guides that might be on top of the form, the basic form that you get. But what's nice about this code is that the project, when it lands for design review, at least has the right shape and size. And so sometimes when, everything's up for grabs, when there's design review and the planning board is making decisions, it's a little bit more complicated. But if design review is just dealing with window types and, which way the entrance is facing and the details, that I think makes the path for development a little bit more predictable than showing up and saying your building's too big, which this precludes from happening if the transects are mapped properly.
Well, that's good. So maybe it is something that we can, like we said, be able to substitute out some of we've got our tables that show setbacks and height. And maybe this is an opportunity for us to kind of replace that table with these types of standards and opportunities. I know we have things like max footprint and those, and it could be nice opportunities for us to look at our mixed use residential 1 and 2 and those type of areas, because these might be able to fit in well. And again, like we said, as this is applied at the state level, if we meet some of these code requirements, if it ends up coming in and we end up having these, there may be benefits that the city could receive by having these, especially in our tier 1A, tier 1B areas going forward. So.
Well, thanks for having us. Yeah.
Yeah. Do you have other opportunities for information that folks can look at? If you send me information, I could send it out to all of them.
We could send you the slide deck.
I believe there's also a newsletter that I can track down the link to and send you.
That the Let's Build Homes people have put together?
Yeah. I think they send it out either monthly or biweekly.
Great.
All right. Well, thank you guys so much for giving us the time. We really appreciate it. And I'll be in touch with you or Jack or Miro to go and figure out next steps, what the commission wants to do going forward.
Great. Thanks
Great.
again.
All right. Have a great night.
Okay.
You too.
Bye.
Does anybody want to, do we have anything we want to chat about with respect to that presentation? We just want to,
I think I had one question for Mike. How much of an overlap do you see, or how much of this is this? Do you see this as zoning, and how much do you see it as design review? I think what I heard you saying is it's kind of a combination of the two, and where we might have the most influence in the work that we're doing is in a design review overlay district, or is it more than that?
There was a little bit which comes in when we have, right now in our zoning, we have design review. And if you're in design review, you meet those standards. If you're outside of design review and your project is big enough to qualify for major site plan, you have to meet the architectural standards. Those standards are the things we thought aren't very good and don't work very well. This would be an excellent opportunity to replace those. And we were, even if at a minimum, that would be a great place to start. Would be
Cool.
We could replace those with a form-based code. And
I think that makes a lot of sense. So you're talking about those are the architectural standards that are currently within our zoning regs, and this is a great opportunity to integrate their work.
yeah, and then we've got those other areas that were kind of in between, where we've got places like National Life is in design review. Our standards are very, and we're kind of like, maybe we don't need historic design review standards up in the National Life.
Yeah.
And yes, our standards are broken into two pieces. We have historic buildings and we've got non-historic buildings, and we do have that all worked out. But at the same time, there's a lot of process where you're like, is this scale necessary at this level? And I think that's where I was trying to make sure we had an opportunity to look at. This is an interesting opportunity to look at, especially infill, those areas that are going to be in the tier 1, res 9, res 6, and in. We could set the form a lot more straightforward and say, here's your form, here's the box you have to meet, and be a little less, let's go to the design review board and let them make a decision. If it's an empty lot and you're in this neighborhood, I think there are benefits of both, and I think it's worth having the conversation, because if you are kind of in a historic neighborhood, property rights versus community rights, it'll, how much of an obligation do I have to make my house not have a negative impact on the historic building that's next to me?
Yeah.
Your basic property rights, and yes, if I own that historic building and it's in a historic district, the expectation, I bought that historic building, and the expectation is I'm going to be maintaining it forward. But if I've got a vacant lot next to the building, why can't I put up a modern looking building?
Right. Cool.
So I just want to throw out a word of caution, like, it's really an interesting presentation. In the examples they laid out, it was like less density. I don't know if you noticed that, right? But it's like, hey, the previous code allows all this, and now we're doing this. And yes, it's prettier. I mean, if you look at the firm, they're mostly architects, right? I mean, they're design experts, right? But I will tell you, like, Newton, Massachusetts is very, very different than Montpelier, Vermont, right? Like, that is the, one of the most premium neighborhoods in Massachusetts. So you can tell a developer, you have to meet all of these really pretty things. I sort of feel like we're kind of begging people to come here and do business, right? And so I think, just as we look at it, Mike, I think, I may not be here when you're having these conversations, but just to think about, is this actually making it harder for people to do incremental infill, inside of our areas? Do we just want to be more flexible and let somebody else experiment with this first? Just some caution. That's my concern, is that guys like Lucky Boardman, who are doing a lot of development, may look at this and say, you know what, I'm just going to build in Northfield. I'm just going to build in Berlin because this is too hard to figure out.
Yeah, I think that it does streamline, right? That's the goal of this.
We can't hear you, Sean.
You can't hear me online? Can you hear me now?
Just checking. Can you hear me, Alan, or no?
Yes, thank you.
All right.
But
can you hear me, Alan?
You're still soft, but you're coming through now. Yes.
I know. All right. Grab this mic. How about now, Alan?
Excellent.
All right. Yeah, we were. I don't know if we've reached this part of the conversation before, but for me, FAR was already on the chopping block. And some idea of form-based code. I like the form-based light because I think that form-based often, like Mike says, our architectural standards haven't gotten us where we want to go. And so having tons of form-based standards is not ideal either. But if you had some sort of form-based light where that was, this is the box and you can add anything onto it, like that sounds appealing. And yeah, I agree, Gabe, that they had their transects that they thought would appeal to Vermonters, and they might not be the transects that we want. We might need to come up with our own.
Right, let's fill it. Like maybe this is the most economical building we can build. I mean, they're building, Let's Build Homes trying to design, like these are things that we just know can get permitted very quickly in any neighborhood. But again, like these are business decisions and we're trying to get housing built. And so all I'm saying is, do we want to be that restrictive? But, can we do something that's like, hey, to basically replace the density that we have, right? I'm in agreement with that. I'm just saying light, like I would recommend being like not prescriptive in terms of, oh, you have to build these, 10 homes that Let's Build Homes came up with, which is, grid on Miro, but like.
That's just that's somebody can. Nobody's going to say that you can only build these 10 home designs, right? That's just
but I
streamlined
getting into the roof. Like, I mean, I'm just saying what they presented was very technical.
Right.
And I'm just saying in Newton, Mass, you can dictate that because it's a premium neighborhood. I don't know how much we want to dictate. That's all. But
not a lot.
Right.
Not a lot.
It's one of these things. Once the building community gets used to it, it's actually a lot easier to use, but there's a big learning curve that goes along with it because you're basically given the shell of a box. And Newport is one community that adopted form-based codes, God, maybe 20 years ago now. So it's a lot of the stuff you go down there. There's no asking what the use is. It's just fits that box and it's this close to the sidewalk and it's this high, then you're good to go. And
that I like.
And that's what you have to kind of get used to. You're not picking up and reading a set of zoning like you're used to picking up this set of zoning. You're picking up that picture that you saw. That's like, okay, my setback is going to be 5 feet. Then my setback is X. That's 5 feet from the side. It's 10 feet or 7 feet or whatever it is.
Yeah, that part's great.
Yep. I can be 3 stories and I got to have a pitched roof that's at least 14, 12. Go.
I'll have,
and then you just you're like, okay, that's well, I don't want a 3-story. I want or I don't want a 2.5 story. I want a 1.5 story, and I'm going to add this much onto the outside. And it's like, all right, well, you're still confined by the footprint. So if you're 1,500 square foot footprint, and you decide, well, I want to do 1.5 stories, and I want to be bigger on the footprint. No, you can't. You're confined by that's your footprint. That's your maximum height. If you want to be smaller, you can be smaller, but that doesn't give you more dimension. You could then move to a different spot and do, on the same site to go through and say, well, I'm going to put a second house over here that's also a 1.5 story.
Yeah, I don't have any issue with that. It was just that they were pretty, their example was very prescriptive.
Yeah, I think most of that came out of the fact that that's where they did their work. I mean, same thing. If I had been working in one community, went to another community, I'm going to use a lot of examples from the one I had just worked on. But yeah, I think there are a lot of opportunities there. I think it would lengthen our time working on this part of the zoning if we decide to make that shift. It's a kind of a fundamental shift in how we design our zoning. I think it'll be a question for the board of time. How much time do we want to spend making that transition versus going through what we've been going through, which is kind of a standard update of the zoning, refixing things, putting that back out, getting that done quickly.
This
maybe.
doesn't take the place of design review district though, right? Because those are mostly historical components that were.
And it sounds like that's what he was saying. It's just they could be married together quite easily. It just the form-based light sets the box that gets people to design review already with you've met the form. Now the historic design review can start talking about, okay, what do the windows look like? And you know, is this a new build or is this a renovation of a historic building? And all those types of historic, non-historic questions that come up.
Alan, do you have something?
Yes, thank you. Hi, Gabe. And I totally agree. A starter home in Woburn is probably almost $2 million. So it's a whole different world. So we would really have to have almost a light version to allow Lucky Boardman and others do something neat, but not be so prescriptive. I just want really back that up as well. Thanks, guys. And thanks, Gabe. It's a fantastic point.
Thanks, Alan.
Okay. Sure, we will continue this conversation at future meetings. Let's move to our next agenda item, which is a discussion of the Country Club Road Subcommittee recommendation regarding the developer for the CCR site and the commission's comments. Sean circulated a draft of his proposed comments on behalf of the commission. Thank you for that. Has anybody had a chance to read that over very quickly, or do folks need a minute to take a
Yes,
look at
I read it.
I can use it.
Thank you, Sean. It was very well.
I must be back on.
What we had done. Well, thank you anyway.
But I wasn't able to make the most recent CCR subcommittee meeting. I was traveling. So if Mike could give us an update, that'd be great.
All right. So the CCR subcommittee did meet and they did make a decision that they are going to recommend to city council of supporting DEW. And they had a number of reasons, but I think they're working. They have Ben is going to be working on their recommendation letter that should be ready for Wednesday or Thursday. So these are all recommendations that are going to council. So there are a couple of ways of framing this. One is, and I didn't get a chance to look through yours this afternoon. But the approach staff is going to take is we're going to put together a staff recommendation as well, and our staff recommendation is really not opposing or supporting, but really kind of laying out the facts of these were the things that we thought were good, and these are the things where we still have some concern, or these are things that we would want the public and the full council to know about the affordability and the design. Staff really thought the design that Chinburg had, it would create better neighborhoods. It was better streetscape. It was a more, urban, new urbanism. We learned a lot from the failed subdivisions of the 70s and 80s. And we kind of came back to more of traditional neighborhood settlements. And that's kind of where Chinburg was putting their pieces together. DEW is back a little bit more suburban, back in a little more 80s curvilinear streets, and there won't be a lot of kids playing in those streets. And so, but DEW, we still have a plan that can be amended. So our thought is, if we're going with DEW, they meet all the other standards. They're great. Let's see if we can work with them as they move their project forward to maybe change some of the street layouts. And that's what staff is going to have a comment on. That we think we can improve upon what's on the land, what's on the plan right now to make, we would like to see more townhomes. We'd like to see a few other things related to the affordability. We think their model obviously works financially. We've had that reviewed.
Both of them?
Both.
Both models?
Yeah, both. Yeah, both. Both group.
DW and Chinburg.
Both of them. Both of them work for Chip. Both of them work financially.
Okay.
So that became a non-issue. Then the question was, which one do you want to go with? And I think the primary concern was with Chinburg was they really weren't responsive about maintaining the recreation fields. And I think that ended up being a big thing that they were, the subcommittee, we asked them, they came in with a proposal. We said, we love your proposal. Can you get us back our recreation fields and do some redesigning? And they really didn't quite meet our expectations, but it's not that the project doesn't work. They just felt the subcommittee liked the additional single family the owner occupied options in DEW. They were less impressed with the rental. As staff, we feel the rental is more important right now. And so we would put weight behind making sure we increase our rental housing opportunities. And we think in the long run, we have a lot of issues. Homeless, they're not going to be moving in here, but the housing pressures, a lot of rental stress, and that's because the vacancy rates are so low. We really need to have more rental units put onto the market to help take the pressure off that. There'll always be opportunities to build single family homes. There aren't always opportunities to build rental properties. So that's a little bit of where we're going as staff. That's not to say we are going to oppose DEW, because we don't. They're a good group. I worked with them to build City Place. They're a fantastic organization to work with. And I think working with them, we can help to kind of make improvements on what they're proposing to kind of get a better neighborhood, better street layout, and more kind of in that way, not to make DEW try to build Chinburg, because that wouldn't be right, but to kind of build over in there. The way they've laid out their streets, let's make some adjustments and make a different layout.
That doesn't seem to change. That doesn't seem to change anything about what you wrote.
It doesn't really change anything about what we wrote. I mentioned that DEW, they did come back. Their phase one is much more of a neighborhood than it was. Before it was, like Mike said, just the winding road stretching on to infinity, rather than a neighborhood. And I would definitely agree with Mike that it would be nice if we could tweak it a little bit more. I am a big fan of grid road networks. They are nice to walk. You can make adjustments to them that alleviate traffic concerns. You don't have to have just every road go through. You can have, design dead ends and pedestrian cut throughs, which, not necessarily that any of that was part of Chinburg's either, but just the idea of some semi-grid, like downtown here is based on a semi-grid network, and people love it. So to add something like that up at Country Club Road would be ideal. I don't know if anybody feels like we need to amend this letter in any way. I know Sal, that doesn't surprise me that the playfield was a critical issue for the subcommittee. Sal was very vocal about having the playfields. It's a bit of a bummer, I think. There's flat ground, in places that we have playfields. We will still have playfields down by the pool. We could rework Dog River. We haven't used it in years, but it's something that the city has. And that you would still have fields up at Country Club Road. Also DEW including commercial would be really nice. I think that's a thing that I would push for if they're selected.
I mean, I would not, you know, I would put forward a motion that we accept the draft that Sean had. I mean, it's not super committal, right? It just points out all these things that you all talked about last week, right? The commercial space, the playing field, you know, all these things that we would desire, and let the city council know we're happy. You know, if it's DEW, you know, that's great. If they choose a different way, then, you know, either one of them would be great, right? I mean, that's kind of what we say in the end. But here are some things that we like about each.
Yeah, I think the real strength of this letter is sort of the echoing of the sort of the three core principles that we laid out, and just repeating those. That's really the value added, I think, that we give to the city council. They're going to make their decision.
Yeah, they can filter if
Right,
they want to use
exactly.
those, they
But-
can
but
filter
we just
through that too.
this helps give them a framework to sort of evaluate. So I think it's great.
It needs to be something.
Oh, no, no.
And I think that the letter needs to be pretty concise as well. Like they're not gonna have the bandwidth to read a lot.
Yeah. And this letter does that. So I
Well,
don't think that
so
many changes.
my feedback is actually, I think that a 3-page letter, we could condense a lot more, since a lot is repeating. Like, my feedback would be, do we need to include all 3 pages? Because it is just a lot of repetition from what we've already shared, and what new information we're bringing seems to be mostly on the 3rd page.
The only reason that I included some of that old stuff is because that previous letter went to the subcommittee, and this is going to go to the entire council. And so those folks have not necessarily seen that. And I thought that the methodology is worth them understanding, because they don't have any concept of the city plan and how it relates to this.
With that said, with both of those pieces said, I wonder if it would make sense if we could potentially put our thoughts from the bottom, DEW construction and Chinburg, up towards the top after our introduction, and put methodology below that, so folks can get there quickly. If they've already read the methodology because they were on the CCR subcommittee, they can skip that, but it's information that someone can go to after the more pithy response.
I like that approach.
I like the way that it is now, only just because I think it's a fairly quick read to get to the actual meat on the 3rd page. And I do think having the background of the methodology, and sort of, again, highlighting the kind of core principles that we used in evaluating it, helps just to contextualize the underlying, you know, the final 2 paragraphs. So I don't think there's a right or a wrong, but for the sake of just not adding more work for anybody,
Sure.
I think it's fine as is.
Well, I'm completely on board with that.
Okay.
I really appreciate this work, Sean. I think I'm happy to send it forth.
Great. So I guess I'm looking for a
So I
think
already
Gabe
motioned.
made
Oh,
a
you're
motion.
giving motion.
You just need a second.
Yeah, I'm gonna second.
Tim will second.
All right. We got the motion. Is there any discussion on the motion? I'm sorry. Can you repeat the motion just very quickly?
It was to use Sean's letter as our feedback to the city.
To send to the
council.
city council.
Yeah.
Motion to support the memo as written and
Send-
submit to council.
All right. Great. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Anyone opposed? Any abstentions? Great. Motion carries. Thanks again, Sean. This is a good letter. Next is a discussion for the, hold on. Leave that time, okay. Discuss future land use map and potential recommendations to the CVRPC. This was something that Tim had put on the agenda. He's been working with the housing subcommittee, and I'll turn it over to you, Tim.
Okay, great. I'm gonna share my screen, and before I actually get to going here, I was wondering if Mike could give a little bit of update of process. Sorry, let me I was just clearing something off my screen. I listened in a little bit to last week's city council meeting, you were present and you were chatting about the CVRPC map, and I was understanding, I think that there was a submittal or pre-submittal that's happened from CVRPC. So I'm curious about what the feedback now looks like. So if it's a housing committee and joint planning commission proposal or recommendation that goes off to CVRPC, how does that happen? Or if it's done separately, housing committee sends something separately from planning commission. So yeah, the sequence of things and the process and how we go from where we are currently.
All right. So the sequence. So the CVRPC has sent in their preliminary map already to the Land Use Review Board. Now that's going to kick off an iterative process over the next 6 months. So there's going to be a review by the LURB, the Land Use Review Board. They're going to simply look at this and they're going to make comments and say, we think that's good. This has to get adjusted. We want more information on that area for the entire county. And the RPC may also have other comments back to them and go through, say, we would like to make these changes. And so,
Mike, we're losing you.
so there's going to be a little bit of back and forth on those two, from those two entities. Eventually, the LURB is going to make a decision and go through and say, here's our decision. It's written. It's going to come back. The timing on that is we're expecting the LURB to have their hearing in August. So probably late in August. So you have still 2 bites at the apple here in July at your meetings to discuss what you'd like in that. To finish the process piece, the RPC is then going to go back and do their final adjustments to the full regional plan, actually, including this land use review map. And then they're going to adopt that hopefully in November and December and have that resubmitted for December, January back to the LURB for final approval. Once the LURB makes their final approval, even before submitting, so basically by September, October, the city council will go to the city council and say, do we want to participate in tier 1B? They say yes. Everything in planned growth area would then be in tier 1B. So that way, as soon as the LURB approves the regional plan, tier 1B goes into effect and the limit of 80 or whatever it is goes into effect. So there's a little bit of back and forth. Now the RPC does want to make bigger updates to their plan. They're saving that for 2028, 2027. So they're looking at next year and going through and saying, we're going to go through and do more updates next year, but we have a statutory requirement to update our plan to meet the land use map changes by December 31st. They're chasing down this deadline that they've got to have this done and approved and submitted by the end of this year. That's a statutory requirement. So that's what they're working on from a timeline standpoint. And then they'll work on the rest. If we want to do tier 1A, that's something we apply for separately later on. That's with the Land Use Review Board. The other part of your question was, who's submitting? So anybody can submit comments. We think it would be best practice if the city as a municipality sent in one request. It would really be bad if we had conflicting things in Land Use Review Board as seeing 2 of us with comments. So our hope would be that if the housing committee has comments, they'll send it to us. If members of the public have comments, they send it to us, and we can combine these all together into a single memo that says this is what the city would like to see as amendments to our map. I have recommended, and the RPC has hoped that the conversation would come from the planning commissions. And I mentioned to city council, my intent was to have the planning commission be submitting that. Although if city council opted to step in, they could take it from us. But
Okay. Cool. This is super helpful. All right. So a little bit of background, and with the links that I sent along. A couple of weeks ago, Sandy Batum, Tim Heaney, and I worked on putting together these maps. Sandy had reached out to Mike, I believe, and Mike connected her with Nick in the planning department to put together a map that had just a series of layers, an ArcGIS online map that had a series of layers that we could then use to inform this work. So I am the liaison from the Planning Commission to the Housing Committee. I'm also my background is in mapping. So when I was working, the way I saw it a couple weeks ago when I was working directly with Sandy and Tim was primarily as a map expert who was listening to their feedback. And I was giving some opinion, but it was mostly Tim and Sandy's work. And I was pulling that into the mapping work that I'm presenting here. That was 2 weeks ago. Last week I presented this to the Housing Committee, and I showed up and said to them right up front that the Planning Commission hasn't seen any of this information yet. So again, I'm showing up as a Planning Commission member, liaison to the Housing Committee, and mapping expert. So I just wanted to sort of set the stage. So I'm presenting that same information to you all now, and I think we should have a discussion and see what we
Does some of this include any input you got from them that night?
Not that night.
No.
Nope. Input from Sandy and Tim from 2 weeks ago, and we were putting this all.
So no input from the Housing Committee?
That didn't change any of this presentation.
Okay. Thank you.
We got a basic stamp of approval with the mapping approach from the rest of the Housing Committee.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great.
There was not a lot of pushback, not a lot of additions. There's one other thing I was going to say. I think I'll get to it. Oh, I added one slide in here that pulls in, I think it was a recent timestamp from maybe a week ago of CVRPC's downtown and growth area. So we can compare it at the end to the proposal that we put together here, or the thinking we put together here. All right, starting with current growth center boundary. This is the shape we all know. One of the data layers that we got from Nick was all of the sidewalks in town. This is a line file. And so what I did is I added a 100-foot buffer around that line file to basically say this is these are the current sidewalk areas. What that allows me to do is then intersect those with all of the parcels in town. Say, okay, which parcels in town are being serviced by sidewalks. And so with that, we see this extent. Interestingly, the next one is looking at sewer service areas. This came to us as an area file. I didn't do any buffering on this. And so I simply took that file and intersected it with all the parcels. And this is
what does buffering mean? That means like you'd filter it.
Sure.
out.
So with the lines that were the sidewalks, if it's a point location, the place that's going to intersect is just really one spot. So sometimes GIS data isn't terribly accurate. Also, sometimes you see sidewalks that are on one side of the road, so it might catch those parcels, even though that's really a sidewalk area. And so if you buffer it by 100 feet on either side of that line, then take that area.
Buffering means you're adding.
Yes, sorry.
Okay.
You're adding area around the.
Thank you.
You're taking an infinitely thin line and you're making it 100 feet wide.
Right. So then you can see it.
That way you can see it.
Yeah.
Thank you. So then this is the sewer service areas and the parcels that intersect. I think you can see here that really all of the sidewalk areas fall within sewer areas. So sewer sort of trumps everything. I just wanted to mention also that I'm doing, at the end of this, the combination that I'm going to show is these are all ors. These are not ands. So it doesn't mean that it's a sidewalk area and a sewer area. I'm showing here to be a little bit more expansive, sidewalk areas or sewer areas, with the idea that in the future, since this is all future land use, that you could potentially expand sidewalks to, if needed, to locations that currently have sewer service. And then I very quickly sort of pulled from our current zoning districts, because I was wondering if this could get expanded even further, places that are housing zoning districts. So I've basically left out rural, municipal, east and west gateways. I think that might be it, but everything else I've put.
Can you go back and forth just so I can see the? So it's like basically basically the same.
It's basically saying
a
there's
reason.
a couple of
method to
small
that.
additions that you get
Yeah.
from this.
Okay.
And then with that, we have maps 1 through 4 combined. So taking all of those ones that I just presented and combining them all into one one big potential growth boundary. You will see some holes in here. We did take out the State House. We took out the St. Augustine's Cemetery. Municipal buildings were taken out. Parks were taken out. So those are just areas that will never be developed. And then what I did was present this to Tim and Sandy. And then we went through the interactive map that I also sent along, which basically shows these exact layers, but we dove into it a little bit further. And they wanted to expand in some areas. Like, let's think more creatively here. Where could we potentially expand both sewer areas and sidewalk areas? Sewer is really is my guess, is the bigger issue because with all of the topography that we have in town, if we're going to avoid building pump stations in different areas in the city, where can we connect to that could potentially gravity flow to our treatment facility? So that we kept that in mind as they then added these additional parcels. I selected them, added through the discussion, and added them into this overall map.
What's the triangle parcel down in the lower?
Good catch. Aaron's wondering what the triangle parcel in the lower left is here, and that is the triangle right near the highway is open land. I think I don't know I forget who it's owned by. I think it's probably the state that owns it. But it was
We're gonna build that in there. Nice.
It fronts on Dog River Road.
It does front on Dog River. Yeah.
Okay.
On the northern section there, that's where the park and ride is.
Okay.
Oh, okay. All right. It's owned by the state.
Owned by the state.
State-owned parcel.
All right, that's probably the only real curveball in any of these. The other ones are, I think, more
Are those
straightforward.
mostly just curious because you were in the maps? Are they mostly one parcels? These big chunks? Are they mostly one?
No,
parcel or
not
multiple?
necessarily. There are some big chunks in here, but
Yeah.
no, not necessarily. It's a little bit hard to see here with the light gray lines, but these do go into the more rural areas, so it's not. So they are relatively large.
Okay.
And then lastly, here's the CVRPC as of July 7th, regional future land use maps. I pulled that layer and just limited it to the downtown center and the planned growth area. I'm just going to flip back and forth here a bit. My only comment, I think, with this is, and Mike's comments in the beginning, I hope that the LURB comes back to the CVRPC and says to them, we love this so much, consider expanding it to be twice as much. And then they'll be very happy to see this map.
Well, it does sound like we can give them a comment now, though, right, Mike? I don't.
No, I know. I'm
Yeah.
sort of being a little bit.
Yeah.
I get a little bit anxious about how the LURB is going to respond to any expanding future land use areas. I maybe I'm being too cynical, but that's one of my.
Yeah, it's interesting. They have, they have an executive order from the governor to do everything that they can, but then the tone that we had when the CVRPC, whatever they are,
Yeah.
when they came in, it was not very open, right? It's
Exactly.
sort of like, we're going to tell you, and that they're going to tell you, and so it wasn't very like heartening to hear that. But
That's what I'm responding to.
Yeah.
It's sticking out.
Yeah.
Territory, right?
Right.
But yeah.
There is, so they are following a required methodology, and that's a lot of the issue. I mean, I know you put them in as ands, and in their methodology that they're required to follow, it's you can do this or this and this or this, and so they've got these. It's not everything is in. It's a mix of things, sidewalks, and.
My concern though, when you look at physical infrastructure on the ground and you're talking about future land use, is that represents in my mind everywhere we have sidewalks right now and everywhere we have sewer service represents in my mind current land use. And so when we're talking about future land use, 20, 50, 100 years from now, why would we ever box ourselves into current infrastructure?
Yeah.
And it doesn't so the rules don't, the tier 1A and tier 1B don't necessarily stop you from developing. Then that's not the point of it. It simply goes through and says what are the areas that are still going to have to go through Act 250. And if we have areas that are planned, we can get them in. And I think that's where the differences come in is, you know, River Street, Route 302 section of River Street. There are no sidewalks. There are no plans to put sidewalks on there. It doesn't meet the definition of a planned growth area.
Yeah.
We would have to, as a community, say, we plan to put the sidewalks in. Here it is in our capital budget. We want this area to build out in a way that's not suburban sprawl, and we expect this to grow in which case it would then qualify for being in the planned growth area. And I think that's where some of the differences are. They also have requirements for areas that are already conserved. So I know the purple box that's at the bottom, that's a conserved parcel. There's some other conserved parcels that are in there.
Is that like conserved through a land trust or something like current use?
I think theirs also grabs up current use, but I think
current use is an interesting one in my opinion because that's a tax benefit that someone might use to maintain their private property as in agricultural land or forestry. But when there's an opportunity potentially to take it out of current use and develop it, and there's an economic incentive to do that, I would argue that should be a space to consider. And it's near a downtown area to consider potentially taking it out of current use, putting it into a future land use map.
Knowing that it's available, right? Is there like some kind of is that something written into the law that they can't consider that, or that's just their methodology?
The methodology goes and lays these things out. And I think in some cases we can go through and push back. I mean, I don't think the LURB intends to hold everything really hard. I think there are going to be areas that we have a lot of opportunity for because it makes a lot of sense. And I think there's some that parcel's on Hill Street. Hill Street's not a great street.
Understood.
And I mean, that would not, as a planner, I would not be sitting there saying it doesn't have a sidewalk. Utilities would have to have a long extension out there. That's a bad intersection at the bottom. That's not probably where I would be pushing to have
I hear you. There's also, I will say one of the discussions that we had is there's also access to the neighborhood that's off of Northfield Street.
Yes,
So
so Northfield Street, I'm 100%.
No, but though accessing that particular property those two
can
properties. Again, thinking creatively here and expansively.
Yeah, I think you'd have to look at a topo map and see if that's possible.
So I mean, I think this is awesome. Thank you, Tim. I'm sure other people have some opinions, but I kind of feel like if whatever recommendation is going to come from the planning commission, we want to know that we have the staff on board, it might be useful to flush through this in more detail, or let Mike take it home as homework and say, Mike, can you come back and present to us what you think you could, support in, as a professional planner, if called upon to do so.
I can go through, I can go through a couple of things I made a presentation to city council, and I can go through that if you want to stop sharing really quick.
Oh yeah.
Pop yours back up. All right, so I'm just going to jump in here on, see if I can close this guy down. It's kind of annoying. I guess they're not letting me do that. Put that over there.
Upper arrow.
Oh, this one you think? No, that's sort. So on I wanted to just go to this one really quick. So this is the map that they have, and I'll go through really quick what I presented to City Council. I think there are a couple of places, easy changes for us to make recommendations on. We've pointed this out many times. This is Independence, and those sidewalks are out there. It's on Route 12. There's a bus route out there. There's no reason this shouldn't be planned growth area. As we zoom in on the stretch here, this is in here next to National Life. It's on Mountain View Drive. There's no reason for that not to be in the planned growth area. I'll just keep going around counterclockwise here. So this area we just talked about, these are the areas that are conserved. The water and sewer doesn't come out this way, or actually, this is the one that's conserved here. The big green one is conserved. These are ones that must be in current use or something because they are in the forest ag designation. This is Hill Street that's coming up through there. This is Berlin Street coming up through there. So again, I think Berlin and Sherwood absolutely should be in planned growth area. The sidewalk ends here, but the sidewalk does go down the hill. So all of this could easily be in. The bus to Hospital Hill runs got to be every 20 minutes. I mean, that runs all the time. There's no reason all of this should not be in. And in fact, I'd encourage Berlin to look at some of their properties over here as well, to add into their growth area. The hard part comes in down here, along Route 302, River Street, until we have a determination that we're going to have plans to change that. The green area,
I'm sorry, why is it? What do you mean? Why is it hard?
because this is called transition. The orange one here, you see what they call it. Transition or infill. So that's not planned growth area. It's an area that would need to transition. And so because there's no sidewalks there and we have no plans to build sidewalks there, it really doesn't count as planned growth area. It's an area that needs to transition. But the rule that is in effect is that any area that is floodplain has to be conservation unless it's in the designated downtown or growth center. So that's why you see all of this as green. It's because these are either wetlands or floodplains or are conserved. And that's why you see all this green area through here. I also pointed out to them, this is wrong. This is in the plane. This is in the growth center. That floodplain should not be there. So that's an error to be fixed. That's Sabins pasture. So that's some of these things. That's why this area out here, they have as rural general for Gallison Hill. I think that would be transition infill. There's no sidewalk on Gallison Hill, even though it goes up to it. So again, if we were to go through and say, we do have a plan, we're going to put in a sidewalk, we're going to make this work, it would qualify under the rules. Now, does that mean we can't fight for it? We can fight for it, but I think we should make a couple buckets as we think about it. Here's the list of things where there are errors. Those are easy to fix. Don't even need to talk about them. These are the things that clearly should be in our planned growth area. Berlin Street, Northfield Street, and we'll have a couple others. And then lastly, if we want to, we can start going through and saying, here are some areas we think we could add in. Here's another area up here. This is Town Hill. This is, I always forget this one, Glenview. That's Murray. I know that. The left side of the street is in planned growth area. The right area is not. That should all be planned growth area because the sewer comes out here. So I would add those in. I think, and what I had done for them is I had a side by side. The other half was our future land use map. So I think this line right through here looks like they fixed that one though. This was a mistake at the council meeting that is now fixed. I think this strip of yellow should be pink. That's yellow means rural general. that's next to the park. I mean, there's the swimming pool right there. That should be planned growth area. If you're building within this 100 feet, you should be able to benefit from that. So I think there are a number of these areas like this that we could talk about. Yes, this would be the stump dump. If we talk about putting that in, that's an idea. I think a lot of this was very similar, but I think we've talked about, Alan had talked about, this is Crestview. Our zoning district, our Res 9 kind of kicks out and captures some of this and and some of these other areas. So this area could move out. And I think you showed that on your map when you did that,
Yeah.
this is a much smaller version of what I think should be over here on this side. So I think we have a lot of these really easy wins that we can go through and say this and that. The last thing I wanted to point out that I didn't talk about at the council meeting, but I want you to consider or have in the back of your mind is we talked about this area down here. This is the school, Department of Labor, liquor, Green Mountain Power. I'm talking with Christian and Brian at the RPC, and I'm going to shift ourselves over to Berry City and zoom in to the north end of Berry City. And so here's this area of white. This is Route 62 coming on down into the intersection, and you come down into the big purple area of their designated downtown, their downtown center. They have a lot of pink around here for their growth, their planned growth area, which is great. But they also have an awful lot of area that is now pinched up. That's Route 14 going up. All this area, because it's not in their growth center, is all classified as conservation.
Yeah.
And so if you're trying to orient yourself, you're like, where am I? If you come to the end of Route 62, you go to the light, you make a left, you're going to go past Beverage Baron on your right. You're going to have
Cumberland Farms out there, I think.
Cumberland
They're-
Farms is on your left. Your RK Miles is out here.
It's conservation.
The Moutois, and a lot of the roads as you're coming up. These are a lot of roads in here that have a lot of housing on it. That's all designated conservation. So the RPC, what they would like to be able to do is to create a new district and propose it to the state, which we would then be able to be a benefit of. It would not get us into the planned growth area and remove us from Act 250, but it would get us out of this type of conservation. They want to create a new district and add it to the methodology that anyone in the state could use called resilient infill. And the point of that is to look at areas like the north end of Berry, North Main Street on Berry, and our properties as well, that we can be able to go through and say, hey, it doesn't make sense to go and designate the Department of Labor as conservation. It just doesn't make logical sense. If something happened there, or if we're going to do some infill there, we're simply going to elevate the building. And a lot of these maps treat the floodplain, a 100-year flood event, you've got 1 inch of water on your property, you're conservation. And we're like, I could elevate my building 2 feet and I'd never get wet.
Yeah.
And it's like, that's not good enough. Can't do that. And it's like, well, for existing developed areas, now in a rural area that hasn't been built out, that makes a lot of sense. We should conserve as much floodplains as we can. But if you're downtown Montpelier or downtown Berry or maybe downtown Northfield or Waterbury, I would bet would be a similar one. They're going to have a lot of these green zones that you might scratch your head.
Sure, like the whole downtown.
Yeah. Well,
Right?
they have a
Because they got a designated.
because they have a designated downtown. Otherwise, they would be in the same way. But you can see this is Waterbury's village.
It's still a lot.
You still have all the area that is
State buildings.
heading out towards not Duxbury. but out towards Middlesex on Route 2, that intersection, you leave on Main Street, you'll leave their designated downtown. And as soon as you do, all those buildings out there, including their ice skating rink, are all conservation. And so you see a number of neighborhoods that are kind of hiding out here, and you're like, okay. So that's a little bit of what they're trying to tackle with, and we're surprised we are the last region to submit our maps, and we're really kind of surprised. How is it we're the first ones who've kind of realized this is a big issue? But we're going to go to the LURB, make a recommendation. I think it would be good for us to kind of go in, kind of supporting their idea, which for us, as I zoom us back in, is really impacting mostly in this area. Our area, which we said, hey, we want to make this mixed use residential too, big buildings. We could have infill here in the future if something happened to the Department of Labor building or the Department of Liquor building or GMP, or the school decided it was going to consolidate and this would become available for some other use. We could build in this area provided it's built so many feet. But because it's not in the planned growth area, it wouldn't be tier 1A, wouldn't be tier 1B. We'd still have to go through Act 250, but it's not designated conservation in the future land use map, which may come up to bite you if you do have to go through Act 250 and you have this requirement to be consistent with the regional plan, and your regional plan says you should be conservation. So that's a little bit of the thoughts.
So how did this overlap? What you had presented versus what Mike just walked through?
Well, what Mike just walked us through is some of the thinking that the planning department has had in terms of further expanding what CVRPC has already put forth to the LURB. My recommendation from here would be I would love to, if we have some consensus here with the work that the housing committee has put together with my help, send this over to Mike and the planning department and sort of, what are the areas really we're going to take away at this? So not expand it, but pull back. You're always welcome to expand it. But where have we gone too far? I can see, for instance, where you mentioned River Street, Route 302, if that's not in a city future plan really to expand sidewalks, for instance, okay, we can take that out. Parts of Eastern Gateway, we can take out. That would be my recommendation. And then we have a map that I don't know, that the housing committee and the planning commission is putting their stamp of approval on to send forth to CVRPC.
Is there what's the format for the input that we would give? Is it a letter? Is it a map? Is it both? What is it?
I think it's going to be probably a map. We'd probably have an annotated map with a memo that would go through, because what we're going to want to do in some of these cases, especially where we say this is an error, we're going to point to the thing and says that floodplain shouldn't be there because of this section. And the other ones we would go through and cite very directly, according to your methodology, because when we did our future land use map, we followed this methodology to create our future land use map, and it included this area in pink, and it included all of Sherwood and Berlin Street in pink. I think we disagreed a little bit on the colors down here. We had them blue, they had them orange. Doesn't make a big difference.
And the process wise, what was the timeline again? We have one bite sort of in July, and then they're going to rule on it in August.
We'll have
we have one more meeting.
You guys will have another meeting in July, so we could put together a memo and kind of decide how we want to do this, and then you guys can vote at the next meeting to go through
agenda item for the next meeting to look at that. Sounds like we don't have much time if we want to do something.
But you don't have to make a decision tonight, but it is something we would want to think about, take input from. So if people in the public have an interest in giving us input, then please give the planning commission, send it to me, and I'll forward it to the planning commission so the planning commission can consider it. How far out do we try to go with some of these things? And as I said, I think Nick did a good job when he read the rules and followed the rules. So our future land use map that I don't have up right now, unfortunately, or I'd pull it up real quick, has that followed the rules, and it covered a lot more area than they had. But I think we're like 90% of there. We can get another 10%, and if we can start to work with the RPC to say, hey, we support the RPC's interest in creating a new district, we think that district would apply in this part of
Well, I think
Montpelier.
I think it'd be really good. You've got a housing task force that's really super competent. We have a GIS expert that worked on. I think it'd be great if we can all mesh something that is like combined, that, you know, we really can feel like, hey, this is Montpelier's very best thoughts, right? We had some really good people work on this along the way. So maybe there's some things from Tim's that you can pull on.
Yeah, and I think eventually it would just reach a point where we say, and we have some other places that we have interest in. And I think those, I just don't want to put us all into one bucket and
No.
then have them start to throw out the good things with
We
the
don't
bad
look-
because
look outrageous.
we over asked. We really want to lay this into a couple of buckets of these are errors that can be fixed.
Right.
These are the things that we think are just obviously meet these rules and should be in planned growth area, period. There's no reason they should not be. And then we have these other areas which we think, getting to Tim's and the housing committee's argument, we think here are some other opportunities to further expand on these because, and this is where I might lean on, you know, it's kind of the old, despite the fact that it says we don't meet it, we wouldn't say it that way, but effectively that's what we're going to be trying to do, is say it doesn't meet the rules, but here's why you should approve it anyways. And I think that's where we've got to be creative, and I have to lean on you guys to say, okay, what is going to be our big argument that says Gallison Hill is in? Because I can tell you why Gallison Hill is out, and I can tell you why the LURB is going to say Gallison Hill is out, but we need to go through and say, but despite that, we should be in.
There's a bike path that runs to the base of Gallison Hill.
Yes.
Like it is
Yeah.
and
Yeah, and
there's
it's
a stretch there that doesn't have sidewalks, but
yeah,
I don't, that's
What's that? So in this method, what is the deal with the sidewalks, right? Because you could put a sidewalk, if there's a sidewalk 100 feet away, like, okay, if that's a requirement, I can run as a developer that wants to build, I'm going to apparently build a bunch of sidewalks. So, you know, like you can do that. It's not impossible to build sidewalks.
yeah. So there are rules that go and say if you have a street with less than 1,000 cars, you don't need a sidewalk at all.
Mhm.
So Gallison Hill doesn't
And it
meet
could still be-
Gallison Hill doesn't meet
And
that.
it could still be in the.
and it could still be in the planned growth
Okay.
area. So that's why we haven't worried for a couple of places that we're like, you know, down the hill Isabel Circle. It doesn't actually cross that threshold,
Mhm.
and it also has a sidewalk for part of the way down.
Mhm.
And by the time the sidewalk ends, the amount of development is too low,
Is below that.
is below the 1,000 threshold. So that's why Nick went through and said this is in,
Uh-huh.
even though there's no sidewalk, it's still in because it's less than that 1,000. So there are all these little check boxes that you can go through to add ones in. The issue comes up when you've got a road like Gallison Hill that exceeds it, and you're like, and it doesn't have a sidewalk, and we haven't planned
Okay.
a sidewalk.
So that's going to be the hard case.
That'll be the hard
Because then you really would have to have a plan showing that, you know, that DPW was going to actually
Yeah.
develop that.
Yep.
Okay.
There's a planned reconstruction in 2031 of Gallison Hill Road, and
Okay.
at that point we're going to put this in. It's already budgeted, and then we could make the case. But that's not a plan at this time, and
So if it's under the threshold and it has the sewer and water, though, we're good. Right?
Yes.
Is that right?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
And then if it's under the threshold, then we're also good.
Yep. And that's where we've got a lot of these things. And some of these areas just come in, some of Allen's property that goes way out to the Middlesex line. We included up to the parcel line. We can include up to another line going all the way to, across those wetlands, all the way to the Middlesex line.
Aaron, we got like 3 minutes.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I know Alan and Sandy have had their hands up.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
quickly, we are up against we have about 2 minutes left. So Sandy, if you have something you'd like to add, great.
Yeah, I do. I didn't get a chance to speak at Housing Committee. I'm going to speak as quickly as I can to get it in public record. A couple clarifications. I think it's really important that whatever the city does is we get it out to the state level, to the LURB before they have their first meeting. I think it just because it'll be more collaborative rather than confrontational that way. Tim and I definitely used the VAPTA methodology the whole time we worked on the maps. I respectfully differ with Mike. I have several emails back and forth with Christian that the conservation infill zone he's talking about, infill is a loose definition of development in the area. It doesn't have to be on the parcel. And you definitely can include it. It is an optional for the VAPTA in the process. Current use, I just looked this up. It is current use is not specifically mentioned. It reads protected natural resources may be included in this FLU area. Just the plan should just note that the resources may be present and will need to be field verified. And there are already development maps for that. Gallatin Hill, if there is a plan in place and money's already being allotted, even if it's 4 years out, I believe that still counts. And because the municipality has a solid plan. I have some other points that I've emailed to Tim Senate, but I don't think I have time to say them. Thank you.
Thanks.
Yeah,
Thanks,
yeah.
Sandy.
My hypothetical, really quick. My hypothetical for the Gallison Hill. There actually is no plan for Gallison Hill reconstruction. I was using it as a hypothetical to say if we did have that, I would be with you and say we should put that in the plan. Go there, but we have no plans to fix Gallison Hill. So
we're agreed
Alan,
then.
Alan, you can have the last word.
Well, I'll be very quick. I just wanted to thank Tim. I am a map geek, and so I am in map heaven. I'm having so much fun using your work. At some point, I would love to just really fine tune the area by my house. The land doesn't have to go super far, but there's about 18 acres that's truly pasture. And one of Tim's maps, you can see it from Google Earth very clearly. And I do have sewer and water going up to the barn. And I'll stop right there and thank you all. I love your maps, Tim. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Alan. So it just sounds like this is going to be probably a front burner issue item on the agenda for the next meeting. So let's keep this in mind as we
Mike, will you
over the
really
next
get
couple.
us like an advanced read before we come? Or
yeah, if you want me to put something together, I mean, I'll probably try to work with Tim a little bit to try to put something together. I have a little bit of vacation coming up as well, so I'm going to try to squeeze that in with some other stuff. But yeah, for the next meeting, we'll try to get that at least a framework of what we're talking about into a couple buckets.
Excellent.
Great. Seeing at 7:30 and looking for a motion to adjourn.
don't move.
Second.
Great. All those in favor?
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Didn't think so. Thanks.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.